Okay, we're talking about getting towards an equilibrium, a new equilibrium of facilitating public-private partnerships. Robert, what do you think we here collectively, individually, the UN, whoever, where do you think you'd like to see change?
Well, as you know, you've heard my bias. One is I think we need to begin to think about an alliance for development and bring in some countries and have some standards about membership and actually fund it and do something. The second thing, when I was in government, when I was last in government in the Clinton administration as the Deputy Secretary of Commerce, we had an idea to have much like the woman Mary here suggested in bringing together the private sector. One of the things I always heard was the U.S. is one of the cheapest contributors to foreign assistance in the world. When I was looking at what all of our private companies were doing, which is not captured, and we thought of doing a conference with USTR because we thought it would be helpful in actually going on a road show, actually figuring out, what is the contribution of American enterprise offshore in development. I actually think we should renew, we never got it off the ground because we ran out of time, but that's something I hope that a new administration will sort of think about doing. I think it would be very helpful to quantify it and then try to systematize it.
Okay. Dirk, from your perspective, what would be helpful? Next steps?
I think what we got to do is create coalitions that build and drive success on the ground. I think it's clear to everyone that I'm not a big believer in systemic and clearinghouse type solutions.
I think you get a strategy and then get a coalition around a strategy.
I think if you find players like some of the ones that we find in the room here today to build success cases, since we've heard some success cases, then make sure that we profile them much better than we have done so far, and that last but not least, bring them to scale. Scale is phenomenally important. I mean, there's dozens of fantastic examples of poverty alleviation around the world. Unfortunately, many of them are rather isolated. And that isolation prevents us getting to scale. If you want to ever reach that infamous 3 billion, as we've people, you gotta get it to scale. And the best way to get it to scale, I think, is create success cases by coalitions from the private sector, the citizen sector, and the government sector, and make sure that we make them much more visible than we've done today, so that we can basically spin them out and get them to scale.
The gentleman who spoke here also raised a very important question yesterday that I'm deeply concerned about. I talked a little bit about that fractal problem, because a lot of companies are struggling with how can I be investing in, pick a country, Nigeria, when I've got issues here in D.C. So that we're getting a fair amount of, I've got scarce resources and my division of labor doesn't work. But one of the things I'm really, really concerned about is the education divide. That the United States, for example, has always traditionally been a one-hump economy with a broad middle class in the middle and kind of small tails, 12% at the bottom end and 5% at the top end kind of thing, and one thing. We're worried that you're going to start seeing a two-hump society where you have an unskilled mass and an affluent mass, and that you're starting to see some of that, say, in Peru or in some other countries where you've got enough of a mass of people who are rising out of poverty, but folks who aren't because of the education differentials. And anyway, sorry to go off on this, but I just think that when we're talking about case studies and the 3 billion and the 3 billion, right, that an increasing marker on this is going to be the education element. Ambassador, you have the last word here. What advice would you give to the incoming administration?
Well, I'll tell you, one comment on my colleagues. I think the way forward is clearly coordination, alliances, orchestration, to pool our resources to the greatest extent we possibly can at this stage to get greater bang for our collective bucks. There's no doubt about that. The Millennium, in all respects, leverage from not only government but also from the private sector, and that's why we're here today having the discussion that we are having. With regards to the next government in the United States, The MCC participated in a panel at the Democratic Convention with Madeleine Albright, Hernando de Soto, who you mentioned earlier, Jim Wolfenson and others on this specific matter of poverty reduction, and there was a similar panel at the Republican Convention. So there's no question that during this period of transition, both potential presidential candidates are very clearly focusing on what needs to be done in the next administration. From our particular point of view at the Millennium Challenge, we have made a very conscientious effort to be bipartisan and have met with both candidates and have an ongoing dialogue with them. I think it's clearly understood by them as well that the disarray that presently exists within the U.S. government with regards to efforts of development assistance needs to be brought under control. And I sincerely hope that the comments they're making about that at this particular point will in fact be done come January 20th, regardless of what the administration is. It needs to be done for effectiveness. It needs to be done for the American taxpayer.
Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. Robert Mallett, Dirk Ellison, Ambassador John Danilovich, thank you so much.